Yeah, thanks. Thank you again for the invite, and it's good to be back. I lived here for almost 3 years, but I was in Penang Island for quite some time, working in a research center there. So it feels like being back home. Yeah, so I'm going to touch a little bit on the governance structure for us and what policy has looked like in different regions of Africa and the lessons that we've been taking with the newly drafted open science policy in South Africa. Yeah, so it's a good thing I don't have to explain the UNESCO recommendation and its principles. So what it boils down to when you crystallize everything is that it aims to make sure that science is accessible, inclusive, and equitable. But overall, it benefits all or benefits society. So this is what it crystallized down to. So when we looked at the UNESCO recommendation, the African Open Science actually kind of preempted what was coming, because we were quite lucky that South Africa was one of the leading proponents of the draft of the open science. So they had in mind that this needs to start happening. So if we look at when it started, this convening of trying to develop open science initiative in Africa, not in South Africa, started around 2015. So you had the pilot phase of the AOSP, or the African Open Science Platform, being launched together with the academies of South Africa and CoData. And then, of course, it started looking at the community of practices in the whole of the continent. And once we had what we call this pilot study, we had a launch between 2018 and 2019 of the official AOSP. We all know what happened here. We lost a little bit of time during COVID, but however, in true form, between 2021 and 2022, the implementation of the platform started, where people or resources, human resources required to drive this project were acquired. So what had happened in order, because the AOSP was an African initiative, so a call went out to ask which organization in the continent can host this initiative. It was an open competitive call which the National Research Foundation of South Africa applied, and we awarded the call. So we sit at the NRF in South Africa, not because I'm South African, it's because the NRF were awarded this initiative to host the AOSP for 5 years. We might have to move if another organization takes up this initiative, because it is an African initiative. So this is just how it has been structured, to make sure that it's a continental wide. So not one country owns it, it's for the continent. So what was the aim to do is to make sure that the African scientist is at this cutting edge of contemporary data, digital and technology, to make sure that, of course, we address African challenges, which most of them are related to global challenges. So if you look at the SDGs and you compare them to the AU 2063 agenda, there's only one difference between those two, where we look in general that all the aims and targets are overlapping. So what do we think at this moment is required? Of course, we just had the previous speaker talking mostly of data and data and data. It means you need these computational facilities, both virtual and physical, to make sure that you can utilize. You need the infrastructure to make sure that you can achieve your aim. With the infrastructure, so we think this point where you need to develop institutes that are focused on data and AI. We know with GPT-A these days, AI has come up. So if you then look at this point, number 4 here is connected to this, because you need to capacitate for people to be able to actually use to be able to perform this data analytics using the infrastructure that has been developed. And of course, all this is not just simple data and computer, it needs to be linked in programs. So programs, of course, are continental, but you will find that in Africa, as we know, is such diverse, there will probably be more regional than continental. Yes, we might have priority overlaps, but we envisage that each region will have its own priority areas, and we will try to connect somehow. Then, lastly, is talk. With open science, you really, what we've seen is that I go in the room and I think, okay, we've been discussing open science, everybody should know, but no. Everybody is asking that, really, what about this? Have you thought about this? No, I haven't thought about this. Somebody thinks about the same thing, but a little bit differently. So we really need to talk with open science. Otherwise, it is so complex. We will end up with different ideas and don't bring everybody on board. So it's important for us to talk with all our partners. This is the reason that I think when we discussed with the meeting, I think we met Sherazad via another partner. But I think we have dumped Michael now and we are both moving because we have seen that we need to talk. You need to talk and you need to crystallize these ideas. So we were talking a little bit on policy previously, so I will touch on it. And then I will touch a little bit on how we are trying to think about using policies in trying to address these continental and global challenges. And I will talk about, I know we talk about this, but I don't want to talk it in open access. I want to talk at it as open science communication. So as I said, this just recaptures what is said in our mission and vision. So the AOSP has a strategy and implementation imperatives. We need to have governance. So the platform management, which is we call the secretariat, has already been instituted. This is by, again, normal recruitment where people were applied and you got a job. But governance is a little bit different. We will discuss how we have visualized governance in AOSP, and then some enabling activities and operations. So governance in the AOSP, what we have decided, again, because Africa is such a diverse continent, we have gone into making a call. So we see that, yes, the Secretariat is sitting in South Africa, but can we have nodes sitting in 5 regions of Africa, which is West, Central, East, Southern, and Northern Africa, so that they can discuss their region, what does open science mean and what are the imperatives. So by the end of this month, we'll announce, we have done the selection, we'll announce which institute will be responsible for making sure that the open science happens in their region. So the platform, the Secretariat, because we have a little bit of some funds from the International Science Council, and of course the South African government has been generous in funding us, so we will put up seed money to make sure that we start up some of these activities in these nodes. At the same time, we also made another call for the governing council of the AOSP. So we made a call for somebody the Secretariat needs to report to and the nodes needs to report to. As of yesterday, we have sent out all the appointment letters. We have appointed 10 board members, again, from all African countries. It was an open call, you applied, and then the selection happened. On top of that, in the board, we have ex-official members, which is represented by UNESCO. So UNESCO has accepted this seat as an ex-official member. International Science Council has done the same thing, and then we have added co-data on it, and then of course the Secretariat. So it is now complete and we can start functioning properly. So meanwhile, while we've been trying to set up these governance structures within the AOSP, we have started working on what we call strands or activities that are important to implement open science. So we've been discussing in regions. So what we thought we would go about is that instead of first talking to each country, we go using the economic zones or the RECs, where we get all the countries and we discuss with vice chancellors and also HODs responsible for science and technology. What is their feeling? What do they think about open science? And from those discussions, you will more likely get a feel which country is more ready to have a more deeper discussion. So from there, then we start speaking to different countries based on those discussions. So when we went in the East African region, we found that Ivory Coast, which already has an open access policy, was more receptive to starting talks on open science policy. South Africa will see a case where they are with their open science policy and some of this. And then there was another meeting in Egypt talking to Northern African countries. So we are trying to do this. Then from there, we move into country level and have this discussion. And at the same time, in these meetings, we introduce priorities that have been happening. So in Africa has been awarded an NIH grant, which will look at open data in health all over Africa. So we are asking member states, whoever wants to involve in this project, which involves open data, they are able to join. So currently we have 17 countries in this, and then of course we will try to build up as possible. In the same time, we are trying to involve NRENs, which are National Research and Education Network, because they generally have some of the infrastructure. So we're trying to address the infrastructure at this moment in time using the NRENs that already exist to try and host and connect this institute. And remember, researchers belong to institute, so institute already belong to an NREN, so it's a little bit easier for them to have access to data. So I am not sure, I stand to be corrected. South Africa is one or only of the few countries that has an exact draft of open science. Not a piece of open access, not open data. It has decided to go all over, new workshop, just a full policy on open science, which is still in draft. We have had 2 open discussion where everybody was invited, and it went back, the first draft. Then we had another second stakeholder meeting, it went back, the second draft, and now the second draft is waiting for ministerial approval. Then it will go 1 round before it becomes policy. So we are close to it. So this policy covers everything, what you think it can. It's going to come back. Of course, now we need to think about the framework. How are we going to make it work? Where is everything going to come from? Because it talks about open data, it talks about open access, open communication, assessment, reward, citizen science, everything is in there. Everything is protected under this policy. Now is the how that we have to think about. So when we were discussing this a little bit, so we found few lessons on it. When we talked to other countries, of course, South Africa went the whole new route, because the discussion around the members that were involved in doing this is that the current STI policies cannot be amended to cover everything. So there's always going to be something left hanging. But when we talk to other countries in Africa, they feel that doing a new policy route is too difficult, so they want to do an amendment on current STI policies. Of course, we encourage also this, because even though it may not cover everything, but it's a start. With open science, I've realized it's such a big animal that you have to start somewhere and decide where you are starting. So some of them are thinking of doing amendment on their STI policies. There was a big discussion on, because everybody says open science, okay, it belongs to science ministries or technology ministries and education, and everybody goes away. Then you start talking about ownership, IP, and then you realize, oh, the scientists and the educationists in the room have no idea what to do. So you start having to bring in trade ministries, economic, as the policy speaker before me talked about this. You really need to have a deeper discussion with this department, because these are one of the challenges. Because when everybody says it's free for all, then who owns what? You know? So if they, because they already have policies on IP, it's just making sure that it speaks to the open science policy. Indigenous knowledge systems, they're enshrined and protected in the open science recommendation. But in each country, in South Africa, we have a Ministry of Culture and Arts. So they need to say, how do this knowledge system, yes, science also is involved in this knowledge, how are they additional in this open science policy? Because this knowledge system needs to be embedded in the open science policy. So there is actually a wider stakeholder engagement if you want to have this all-encompassing policies. And in Africa, I think South Africa is difficult. When I go and speak to other countries, it's even worse. Yes, in South Africa we have 11 official languages. We only have 11 languages. Imagine other countries that maybe only have 2 official languages, but they have so many dialects. When the open science recommendation says science has to be multilingual. It has to be multilingual. In 2 years' time, UNESCO is going to come and ask each country, what have you done on open science? But what you will find, this is a little bit of the top. The bottom is actually what makes this work. We need to really think about data, publication, incentive, and stewardship. And this is all the doers. Sometimes us policymakers forget about the doers. And lucky for me, I used to wear a hat of a doer. I am a geneticist by training. So if these people are not taken care of, we can forget about this. We can just might as well leave the room. So this is why when we discuss open science, I feel we need to discuss alternative to publishing. Archives are one solution to try and figure this out for now. They are not the end of it all. They are just a middle ground. So when we discuss this open access, I don't want to start every open science discussion start being an open access, so I need to remove this. We need to think about open communication. How do we communicate science openly? Communicate. How do, as a scientist, you write a communication for your society, not for your peers? So I used to work, as I said, I lived here for 3 years, so I was attached at the center at USM, University of Saints, Malaysia. I worked on the rubber genome. So I can tell you what we did to find out what genes are involved in the terpentine synthesis. But once I said that to a policymaker or to a society, I said, my research is based on finding out genes that are involved in cis-terpentine production. The person says, what are you talking about? Because that's how we write. The more complex words you use, the more learned you feel. But all I was doing is to find out how does the tree make rubber. That's all it was. So how can we communicate that way so that the science is useful to the person you said you're doing the science for? Again, I asked this question to the room. When we apply for funding, what do you say? Yes, I will use the NRF because that's where I used to get my money as a researcher back in the days. I am writing this proposal because I want to check the quality of water that this community uses. Right? This is what I said. I take samples, I go and test them in the lab. I find the water is good or bad. After that, what happens? I write a publication in Nature to say, oh, I did this, I found this and this in the water, and this is what I used. And then I go back to the funding and say, this is the publication I produced with the money. Where is the community in there? Because you wrote the proposal to say you are going to help the community. We need, as scientists, also to change that mindset. We are doing science for society. Any science, social core sciences. But the researchers or knowledge producers will only do that if this changes. If their assessment changes. Because for their career path to grow, they need to produce papers. Nobody asked them, how many communities have you served? Or how many papers have you written in Bahasa Malay to the community you said you are helping? So they know what you are doing. How many data sets have you shared and been used by other people? So institutes need to assess researchers for societally engaged research, not what we are currently doing. We are doing academic impact. We are asking how many publication, citation, meaning how many other people, not the community, your peers have said your work is good. Instead of asking how much of your research has been taken up by the community you said. I am Zulu speaking. Right? If I write a publication in Zulu, more people would read it. If I write a paper in Nature, it will be cited by 5 people. So it means it's only useful for 5 people. Do we understand the metrics in there? The journal is only, if you get a citation, I know the rubber genome because a lot of people were interested. I think I have 400 citations. I'm over the moon. But you send a tweet, you will see that maybe 1,000 people have already read it in 1 week. Which has more impact? Your publication or a tweet? This is why we failed the COVID fight with people I won't name. We need to think as scientists what is more important to communicate and to who. Of course, we need to incentivize them in order to change that behavior. So I always say, yes, country policies are important, but institutional policies are actually the biggest, will be the biggest driver of change of behavior in open science implementation. So institutes don't have this big, you know, when you try to turn a country policy is like driving this big, I don't know, holiday ships that take forever to turn. But institutional policy will be a speedboat because they are not really have to be responsible. They are autonomous. They can say, okay, to award a professorship, can we have so many? I'm not saying academic peer-reviewed is not important, but let's decrease the weight and increase societal impact-based output. My last point, if, again, knowledge producers, that's your research, your scientists, do not adopt open science, not the executives. Yes, the executives can be convinced to write a policy, but the person who needs to engage is the knowledge producer. If they refuse, and they will refuse if they are not incentivized and rewarded for it. If they're rewarded for publication, they'll stick to the old route. So we just need to make sure that we turn the right dial to make sure that the implementation of open science happens. I will end there. Thank you. I hope I haven't taken too much time.